A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. Part 1. Recall to Life. Chapter 1. The Dover Mail. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of the noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil, in the superlative degree of comparison only. There were a king with a large jar and a queen with a plain face on the throne of England. There were a king with a large jar and a queen with a fair face on the throne of France. In both countries it was clearer than crystal to the lords of the state, preserves of loaves and fishes, that things in general were settled forever. It was the year of our Lord 1775. It was the Dover road that lay on, a Friday night late in November, before the first of the persons with whom this history has business. The Dover road lay beyond the Dover mail coach and made its way up Shooter's Hill. He walked uphill in the marsh by the side of the mail as the rest of the passengers did, not because they had the least relish for walking exercise under the circumstances, but because the hill and the harness and the mud and the mail were all so heavy that the horses had 3 times already come to a stop, as well as once drawing the coach across the road with mutinous intent of taking it back to Blackheath. Reins and whip, the coachman and the guard, however, in combination, returned the team to their duty. With drooping heads and trembling trails, they mashed their way through the thick mud, sometimes floundering and stumbling as if they were falling to pieces at the larger joints. As often as the driver rested them and brought them to a stand with a weary "Whoa, ho, so ho, then," the near leader violently shook his head and everything upon it, like an unusually empathetic horse, denying the coach could be got uphill. Whenever the leader made this rattle, the passenger started as a nervous passenger might, and was disturbed in the mind. There was a steaming mist in all the valleys, and it had roamed in its foulness up the hill, like an evil spirit seeking rest and finding none. A calmy and intensely cold mist, it made its slow way through the air in ripples that visibly followed and overspread one another, as the waves of an unwholesome sea might do. It was dense enough to shut out everything from the light of the coach lamps except a few yards of road, and the reek of the labouring horses steamed into it as if they had made it all. 2 other passengers were plodding up the hill by the side of the mail. All 3 were wrapped in clothes up the cheekbones and over the ears, and wore jack boots. Not one of the 3 could have said, from anything he saw, what either of the other 2 was like, and each was physically hidden by their outer clothing. In those days, travellers were very shy of befriending anyone, for anybody on the road might be a robber or in league with robbers. The guard of the Dover mail coach thought this to himself, that Friday night in November, lumbering up Shooter's Hill, as he stood on his own particular perch behind the mail, beating his feet and keeping an eye and a hand on the arm chest before him, where a loaded pistol lay at the top of 6 or 8 loaded horse pistols deposited on a lower layer of swords. The Dover mail coach was in its usual genial position that the guard suspected the passengers suspected one another, and the guard. They all suspected everybody else, and the coachman was sure of nothing but that the horses were not fit for the journey. "Whoa, ho!" said the coachman. "So then, one more pull and you're at the top. And be damned to you, for I had trouble enough to get you to it. Joe!" "Hallo!" the guard replied. "What time do you make it, Joe?" "10 minutes good past 11. "My blood!" cried vexed coachman. "And not at the top of Shooter's yet. Tch, yeah, get on with you." Once more the Dover mail coach struggled on, with the jackboots of its passengers squashing along by its side. They had stopped when the coach stopped, and they kept close company with it. If any one of the three had been brave enough to propose to another to walk on a little ahead into the mist and darkness, he would have put himself at risk of getting shot instantly as a highwayman. With this last burst of speed, the coach reached the summit of the hill. The horses stopped to breathe again, and the guard got down to skid the wheels for descent, and opened the coach door to let the passengers in. "Tst, Joe!" cried the coachman in a warning voice, looking down from his box. "What do you say, Tom?" They both listened. "I say, a horse at a canter coming up, Joe." "I say, a horse at a gallop, Tom," returned the guard, climbing nimbly to his seat on the coach. "Gentlemen, in the King's name, all of ye." With this hurried plea, he cocked his pistol and stood on the offensive. The passenger whom the galloping messenger sought was the coach step. Getting in, the 2 other passengers were close behind him, and about to follow. He remained on the step, half in the coach and half out of it. They remained on the road below him. They all looked from the coachman to the guard, and from the guard to the coachman, and listened. The coachman looked back, and the guard looked back, and even empathetically the horse pricked up his ears and looked back, without contradicting. The stillness caused by the stopping of the coach, added to the stillness of the night, made it very quiet indeed. The panting of the horses made the coach tremble, as if it were in a state of agitation. The hearts of the passengers beat aloud, enough perhaps to be heard, but at any rate the quiet pause was audibly expressive of people out of breath, and holding the breath and having the pulses quickened by expectation. The sound of a horse at a gallop came fast and furiously up the hill. "So, ho!" the guard sang out, as loud as he could roar. "You there, stand! I shall fire!" The pace was suddenly checked, and with much splashing and floundering, a man's voice called from the mist. "Is that the Dover mail coach?" "Never you mind what it is," the guard retorted. "What are you?" "Is that the Dover mail coach?" "Why do you want to know?" "I want a passenger, if it is." "What passenger?" "Mr. Jarvis Lorry." Our poor passenger showed in a moment that it was his name. The guard, the coachman, and the two other passengers eyed him distrustfully. "Keep where you are," the guard called to the voice in the mist, "because if I should make a mistake, it could never be set right in your lifetime. Gentlemen of the name of Lorry, answer straight." "What's the matter?" asked the passenger, then with mildly quavering speech, "Who wants me? Is it Jerry?" "I don't like Jerry's voice. If it is Jerry," growled the guard to himself. "He's a horse, sir, then suits me, is Jerry." "Yes, Mr. Lorry." "What's the matter?" "A dispatch sent after you from over yonder, T & Co." "I know this messenger, guard," said Mr. Lorry. "He may come close. There is nothing wrong." "I hope there ain't, but I can't make so sure of that," said the guard in a gruff soliloquy. "Hello, you." "Well, and hello, you," said Jerry, more hoarsely than before. "Come here slowly, do you hear me? And if you've got holsters, so that saddle of yours, don't let me see your hand go near them." The figures of a horse and rider came slowly through the eddying mist and came to the side of the coach, where the passenger stood. The rider stopped and, casting up his eyes at the guard, handed the passenger a small folded paper. The rider's horse was exhausted, and both horse and rider were covered with mud, from hoofs of the horse to the hat of the man. "Guard," said the passenger in a tone of quiet business confidence. The watchful guard, with his right hand at the stock of his raised pistol, his left at the barrel, and his eye on the horseman, answered curtly, "Sir?" "There is nothing to fear. I belong to Tellson's Bank. You must know Tellson's Bank in London. I'm going to Paris on business. I may read this." "If so, make sure you're quick, sir." He opened it in the light of the coach lamp on that side and read, first to himself and then aloud, "Wait at Dover for Mademoiselle. It's not long, you see. Guard. Jerry, say that my answer was recalled to life." Jerry started in his saddle. "That's a strange answer too," said he at the horses. "Take that message back, and they will know that I received this, as well as if I wrote. Make the best of your way. Good night." The coach lumbered on again, with heavier clouds of mist closing round it as it began the descent.